If someone asks me what's the hardest part of being human, I would say without hesitation. It's handling ambivalence. It is hard to be human because we are full of contradictions and complexities, and that can make us feel overwhelmed, confused, conflicted, and exhausted. For example, do you like your job? How do you answer that? Well, there's a lot of things I like about my job. But I don't know if I like my job overall. That's called ambivalence. You have mixed feelings about something that you can't resolve. You have these opposing forces pulling you in different directions, which creates this internal conflict inside of you. Ambivalence is basically uncertainty about making a decision. You have positive and negative feelings towards something, so you can't decide what to do. And ambivalence is particularly hard when the decision that you're struggling to make affects other people. Let me give you an example from my own life. So a few years ago, I was working at a company and I had a good job, but it was a stressful job and I wasn't feeling great. And I had this job offer from another company, but it was at a lower level than I can't leave. If I took that other job, I would take a step back in my career. But it was a less stressful environment. So it was this big struggle for me to decide what to do. Do I take this new job that I was qualified for, but it's not quite as good as what I currently have? Or do I stay where I am? Now, what made this situation particularly difficult for me is that the decision wasn't just affecting me, it was also affecting my husband. My husband and I talked about it and encouraged me to pursue that job because it was gonna be a better fit for me. But by me taking that job, it would mean that his income would drop. We were trying to buy a house, and so it was putting him in a difficult position. On top of that, my mother was sick at that time. She ended up passing away soon after. And my dad was encouraging me to take the new job because it was going to be less stressful and I needed less stress in my life. Everybody around me was giving me advice, telling me what to do. But nobody knew what was best for me except me. Only I could understand how much I liked my current job and how much I disliked it. Only I could understand the consequences of me leaving that job. Nobody else could really understand what I was going through. And then on top of that, I felt guilty because everybody who cared about me was affected by my decision. And the problem with ambivalence isn't just that it feels bad. The bigger problem is that it prevents you from moving forward. Because when you're stuck in ambivalence, you're stuck in this loop of thinking about the pros and cons over and over again. You're ruminating about all these details and you're not actually getting any closer to solving the problem. You're not actually getting any closer to making a decision. We don't like to admit this. But sometimes we use ambivalence as an excuse to procrastinate. We keep thinking about our problems and we think that we're resolving them by thinking about them more. But that doesn't work. When you're ambivalent, it's easy to start making excuses for why you can't make a decision. Oh, I just need more information. I'll figure it out later. There's always been something stopping us from actually doing what needs to be done. And that is why I want to share 3 tips with you today that will help you break through the feeling of ambivalence, overcome your resistance, and finally get unstuck. The first tip is to ask yourself this question: what is the worst that can happen? A lot of times, we ruminate about the negative outcomes that can come from our decisions. So let's say you take this new job. What are all the negative outcomes that can happen? Maybe I won't be able to pay my bills, or maybe I won't be able to save money. And those are reasonable concerns. But they're not necessarily true. You're just imagining potential downsides. Now do the same exercise for the other side. If I stay where I am, what are all the negative outcomes that can happen? Maybe I'll burn out. Those are potential downsides, but they're not necessarily true. You're just imagining them. So now that you've thought about all the potential downsides, look at all the things you wrote down and cross out the ones that are absolutely going to happen versus the ones that might happen. You can ask yourself, is this something that's absolutely going to happen if I take this job? Probably not. Then you can imagine all the downsides that you've crossed out and rank them from most important to least important. Once you've ranked them, ask yourself, am I willing to sacrifice the most important ones in order to avoid the least important ones? For example, I might have to sacrifice some of my free time in order to avoid sacrificing my happiness. That way you can see that it's not an either-or situation. You can try to find a compromise between both sides so you don't have to choose one or the other. The second tip to help you deal with ambivalence is to ask yourself, what does this decision have to do with who I am? This is an extremely powerful question because it forces you to examine whether your values are guiding your decision or whether your identity is guiding your decision. And there's a difference. Let me explain. Let's say you're deciding whether you want to pursue medicine or music. If you decide to pursue medicine, you might think to yourself, well, I'm a smart person, I'm a logical person, I'm good with science, I enjoy science. That sounds like a good fit for me. That sounds like it aligns with my values. Now let's switch it up. Instead of pursuing medicine, you decide to pursue music. Now you might think, well, I'm creative, I'm artistic, I'm emotional, I like to express myself. That sounds like a good fit for me. That sounds like it aligns with my values. But now let's flip it around. You still want to pursue music, but instead of basing your decision on your values, you base it on your identity. Now you might think, I'm a musician. I'm not a scientist. Musicians are creative and artistic, scientists are logical and analytical. So I can't be a scientist because I'm not a musician. That doesn't make sense. And it's the same thing with medicine. Now you might think, I'm a doctor. Doctors are smart and logical and analytical. And scientists are creative and artistic. So I can't be an artist because I'm not a doctor. That doesn't make sense. What happens when we base our decisions and identity rather than values is that we limit ourselves. We put ourselves in a box and we tell ourselves that we can only do certain things because we have this identity. And then we make decisions based on that rather than making decisions based on what we value. So before you make your next big decision, ask yourself, what does this decision have to do with who I am? Am I making this decision because it aligns with my values, or am I making this decision because I'm letting my identity dictate what I should do? Tip no. 3 is to ask yourself, what do I value most in life? This is a question that encourages you to ask yourself not just when you return between two options, but throughout your entire life. What do I value most in life? What do I want to prioritize? Is it my health? Is it my relationships? Is it my work? So many of us are so busy focusing on our work that we forget about what work is supposed to be for. Work is supposed to help us live a good life. Work is supposed to help us pursue the other things that we value. And when we get too caught up in our work, we forget that, and this is a subtle trap that a lot of high achievers fall into. They focus so much on their work because they think that their work is the most important thing, that everything else is secondary to their work. But once you start prioritizing your work over the things that matter most to you, you lose sight of why you were working in the first place. And here's the thing. You can't value everything. If you wanted to value everything, if you didn't want to pick and choose, then you wouldn't be experiencing ambivalence in the first place. You would have taken the path that had all the things that you wanted in it. Ambivalence means that you have to make a choice. You have to pick between two options. And if you turn between two options, it means that there are two things that you value at least equally. So before you make your next big decision, ask yourself, what do I value most in life? And then ask yourself, which option is going to bring me closer to that? I hope these 3 questions help you the next time you experience ambivalence. And just remember, it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to be ambivalent. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep moving forward. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.